Where were you on September 11th, 2001? Good morning, veterans. If you are a member of a reserve component that has spent at a minimum of 180 consecutive days on Title 10 orders, then I have got a treat for you. You qualify for free assistance with your state and federal benefits from the help of your local reserve component transition assistance advisor. No, this is not a gimmick when I say free. Welcome to our next episode of TAA Cafe, where we have a very special guest. But first, let me introduce myself. I am your host, RCTAA Casey Kennedy from Nebraska, and here is my lovely co-host, RCTAA Chandria Alexander from Alabama. We have RCTAA Dan Leatherman from Hawaii running our tech. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Let us introduce you to our special guest while you sit back and enjoy your coffee. Charles Helmholt, RCTAA out of Illinois, is a wealth of knowledge. Seriously, he's great. He's an instrumental part of our social media response team. We seriously could not do this without him. But prior to becoming a RCTAA, what is it that you did for a career, Chuck?
Oh, I've done a few things. I was in journalism for the last like 10 or 12 years of my career, and then before that I was actually an infantryman in the active army, and that goes back way back to the 90s. So yeah, a few different things.
Awesome. So how long were you in the military for?
I think overall I had a break in service. I think overall it was just short of 16 years. Like I said, some active duty time early on, and then about 11 or 12 years of guard.
Well, thank you for your service, Chuck. So while in the military, did you have any special events? Did you get to partake in, like me? I deployed. Did you have anything special or eventful come from your time in service?
Yeah, I mean, I deployed in 2015 to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I spent a year there doing public affairs, public relations, and I guess my real, the thing that I talk to everybody about, I was in the old guard in 99 through kind of 2002, and obviously out in DC, and I was there for September 11th. So that's kind of my big claim to fame, as it were.
So when you say that you were there for September 11th, 2001, what was your take? Were you doing while there? And what did you kind of witness?
Yeah, well, I was a member of the Old Guard, which, if people aren't familiar with the Old Guard is a specialty unit in the United States Army. It's pulled from infantry specific. It's the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment. And it's kind of this weird unit. It's not special operations, certainly, but it is kind of a cut above the rest. And that goes to the selection process. Like, it starts with the officers. The officers are all out of West Point. And all these prestigious schools. So you have like kind of the cream of the crop, the legacy guys, the gonna be legacy guys coming from your officer corps. Your Joes are all chosen from Fort Benning. They're all, there's strict criteria. So every cycle at Fort Benning, you have just a couple of guys that get offered contracts. You have to be a certain height, certain weight, score a certain amount on your PT test, have a GT score of over 110. So as far as infantry goes, especially, not to knock my infantry brothers, but, we all know that they're not all super, super bright guys, very good at killing stuff. Not always the brightest guys. But in the Old Guard, you have this, every Joe is kind of already this well-rounded dude. And then the NCO Corps, they want the bling. So they're pulling NCOs that want to break from Korea or wherever they were, and they're coming back, and they're some of the most decorated NCOs around. So that when you go out to the field, you've got these Joes that are all awesome, and then you're learning from these dudes who are kind of the cream of the crop. So it really does make a really cool unit. We played Op 4 for like Blue Force, like Ranger bats and special operations groups. So it was a good time and a really cool unit.
So it sounds like it was quite an honor to be able to serve with the Old Guard.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Amazing. So let's fast forward to September 11th. Where were you when everything was going down? I know I was in 5th grade, so it kind of dates us a little bit. But where were you?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It has become one of those things that is, like JFK for generations before us, Pearl Harbor. Where were you? And everybody kind of remembers where they were and what they were doing. I was actually right down the street at Fort Myer, Virginia. It's literally a hop, skip, and jump from the Pentagon, and we were practicing doing what we did every morning. We'd finish PT. I was actually in Alpha Company, which back then was on a peninsular base called Fort McNair in Washington, D.C. We were the only company of the Old Guard that was in D.C. proper. The rest of the Honor Guard and the Old Guard were in Fort Myer. So we went over there and we were practicing for this show called Spirit of America, which kind of highlighted the Army's mission to the public. And we back then we had a guy with an old wind up transistor radio. So he would wind it up and he would listen to it. And there, this is before the day where cell phones were super prevalent. And I think I had one. It was like the block, Nokia or whatever. But we certainly couldn't have them in formation and around. So we're sitting in this giant ceremonial hall they called C Hall. And I remember a couple guys talking about something that happened in New York. And then we had a guy run in and tell us, like, everybody get outside. And we run outside, and there's just this unreal sight before us. There, this bellowing black cloud of smoke coming from the Pentagon. And this is not, we all know what the Pentagon is, and it's the nation's symbol of military strength and prowess. But also, you may not know that it employs like 22 or 23,000 people. It's a giant complex, and like there's a mall. Like anybody who's military in the area, them and their families can go in there. There's eye doctors, there's regular doctors. So it's a place where a lot of people come and go. So it was just this surreal sight. And yeah, so we from the get-go, it was pretty crazy day, pretty crazy morning for me.
So you find out, you go outside, you see this black smoke. What happens next?
Well, we actually loaded up on buses, and we were trying to get back into DC to our base, which Fort McNair has the United War College on it. It has like General and Admiral's Row, which house like a lot of very important people, a lot of the highest ranking members of the military. And so we were trying to get back there, and we actually got stopped by the DC police, DC Metro, on the bridge. And they were like, hey, we locked down the city. There were reports coming from everywhere. I mean, when I say it was pandemonium, it was like we had heard like, Capitol Hill got bombed, and there's so much stuff going around. We didn't know what was real, what wasn't. So when they stopped us, and these are a lot of young infantry guys that are really, really pissed off at this point. And I mean, all of us we ran the rest of the way. It's about a 1.5 mile, 2 mile run along the tidal basin of the Potomac River. So if you've ever seen the scene in like Captain America, Winter Soldier, where he's running around the tidal basin, that's the run we would always do. But we were running back to Fort McNair along there, and all the while on the right-hand side, you could see the Pentagon. And I remember everybody running, nobody talking, and it was like a full out as fast as we could run to get back and get to where we need, doing what we needed to do. So we got back, we drew weapons, and I think the first evening, it was all about securing that base, securing our site, kind of locking down the area. And then late that night, early that morning, we got the call that they wanted us to come in and do search and rescue or whatever it ended up being in the Pentagon. So we carted up and went over there.
So how long did you do search and rescue for? Because I'm sure, like, I can imagine how everything unfolding, it was probably felt like an endless night for you guys.
Yeah, so there's several things that you can do in the Old Guard. The Old Guard's known for several different things. They have the silent drill team. They have the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is a big one. Casket teams, which I was a part of, a full honor casket team in Arlington National Cemetery. And then one of the other things that you can kind of do is everybody who gets their security clearance, and it's a special one that allows you to work around the president. You go into the presidential and congressional escort. And because of a lot of us in the Old Guard had this tab, the security clearance tab, they wanted us to go into the Pentagon in place of firefighters because there was so much sensitive material just everywhere. So we got there early that next morning and started going in, and it was clear. I'll never forget. We got these, these white biohazard suits and the little 3M gas masks, and it was clear as soon as you walked in the building that we weren't there for any kind of rescue. Whoever was lucky enough not to be in the direct carnage was already out of there. Everything else, I always tell people, it looks like a bomb went off in a junkyard. It was just complete chaos. Office equipment and stuff just completely melted and strewn together, and it was a crazy sight for sure. So we were there.
Oh
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
The biosuit. I'm curious about what the biosuit and the breathing material, because I've heard that a lot of you guys have had a lot of breathing issues. So even with that, was it still hard to breathe?
Yeah. So when we first got in there, actually, an example, we walked in, and I think I was among the first groups to go in, and immediately there was like a bullhorn that sounded, and we had to come back out. And so they had these inside the Pentagon. They had these giant stone. I don't even know how big. They're at least 6 by 6, probably much bigger, but just these stone pillars that hold up, hold up the building. And some of these were just shredded along where the plane had gone through. And you could literally see an outline. It was crazy. So they were scared of the floors falling in. So what we had to do was we had to take these huge timbers, these, 4x4 timbers, and build around these things back up before we could even start doing any work. So that kind of, physical labor, obviously, it's hot in there. You're in a plastic suit already. You're sweating. And one of the things that would happen is these little 3M masks would just slip off. So a lot of the times you're breathing in all of the air, and there was fire retardant in there that, is not good for you, and some stuff. So yeah, I mean, it did get hot, and they worked when they would stay on, but they didn't stay on too well.
So mentally, how did you feel in that moment? Like, was it complete the mission, or was it fear? Like, what was going through your mind in that moment?
So, when I first, I remember I had at the time, my wife was pregnant. She was like 7 months pregnant. So when it first happened, I was terrified, not necessarily for myself, but I mean that too. But I was terrified that, like, this is World War III, and my wife and unborn son are here. Luckily, I was able to call them before we even went over and, get out of the city with some other friends, and we got them together, and all the wives and everybody left. So I didn't have to worry about that. But initially going into the Pentagon, I mean, it was very disheartening because we were there you're hoping to go save somebody, and then you see this mess, and you're like, well, there's nobody alive in here. It's clear. So we did get, and we got briefed by the firefighters who were on the ground, and the firefighter was kneeling there, and he's half in tears, and he's telling us, they're trying to tell us what to expect, because yeah, we're infantrymen, but we're also a lot of young kids, and these guys deal with that stuff, and they were saying that you're probably going to find a lot of what they told us, what they thought happened, and I is the case, is that when it hit the Pentagon, the plane kind of went inside out, and all of the people inside the plane were just caught in that. So there was a lot of pieces that we would find, but they were also telling us about on the outskirts of it, be prepared, because that's where you're going to find people who died, and they're not going to be pieces, they're going to be full people, and you're going to see that, and you're going to experience it. And they were saying that God, this heartbreaking story this guy was telling us, that I guess the windows on the Pentagon are made to withstand a bomb blast. They're like reinforced Kevlar or something. And that they were watching these people's hand. The rooms were filled up with smoke, and they were watching these people trying to break the glass, and they couldn't break it. So, they're just telling us all this heartbreaking stuff, and I'm glad they did, because it really kind of set not only the tone, but also some expectation of what we were going to go in there and deal with.
So prior to this, had the military really taught you resilience or done anything to help prepare you for resiliency? Because in my time, MRT came out in 2009. And so while we were overseas, we did the master resiliency training, which helped some. But what about during 2001?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Thankfully, I have seen a shift, right, over my military career. In the infantry in the 90s, I can tell you it was very much still the same mindset that you don't talk about it. It's you're weak if you do, whatever. Now, I will say that there were all, September 11th was such a weird time. If you guys remember it, the whole country kind of came together. And I was like at this pinnacle, one of the two pinnacles of where that happened. And I saw, we were there, we actually lived on site there for about a week, I think. And then they started letting us go home and come back. But we lived in tents on the front lawn, right outside the crash site. So we would do these shifts where we would do like 6 hours-ish inside, and then we would come back and rest, and then we would go out, and they closed the North Pentagon parking lot off, airspace and everything. And that's where they would take all the material, and they would put it that we took out of the Pentagon, they would put it there. And then they had guys with security clearance, God level security clearances coming through, go through it all and find out what to do with it. So we would guard that as well. And I remember there were these groups of people that they would come down there and they offer their services. They set up these telephone lines. I can't remember the company that did it, but that we could, after a few days, so that we could call and, call our wives and our parents and all the, some people, the guys had kids, they could call them. And so that was such a huge help. And I'll never forget, one of the groups of people that came down there were a group of counselors. And, they came to us and they said, the worst thing that you can do is not talk about this stuff. If you bottle this stuff up, it will become corrosive, and maybe not now, but later in life. I can remember the guys saying this stuff clear as day. I know guys in my unit who didn't listen to it for whatever reason, and they had problems. I luckily I took their advice. I talked to friends. I talked to my family about it. I've always been as open as I could about it. And I definitely had issues. I mean, I don't want to be too graphic, but some of that stuff you're going through ended up being, you couldn't even tell, but it was pieces of people. And I remember one time my mask slipped off and I smelled this burning person smell, and I literally associated it with chicken. And it's not a joke. I know it's kind of weird just because everybody says chicken tastes like everything else, but in my mind, I could not barbecue chicken. Every time it was around me, I would get nauseous. And it took me a couple of years to process that, but it happened. I got past it. And I was able to deal with all this stuff. And I firmly believe, because those people told me and I took the advice to talk openly about it, to talk about it with my friends and family, I was able to do that. So in our job now, I make sure I don't care if I'm at a retirement or if I'm at a, crossroads of it, whatever it is, I always tell people the same advice. Hey, if you know somebody or if you're somebody struggling, there are resources out there. Talk to a friend, talk to a family member, call me, and I'll get you the resources of somebody who can help you.
So what kind of resources are your favorites? Because I know a lot of people have such a negative connotation when it comes to the VA, but there are an abundance of resources outside of the VA. What are some of your favorite ones?
Well, I think my favorite one is probably the Vet Center. I know we all push the Vet Center, and for good measure. These guys are all, they are so dedicated to the cause of helping soldiers and veterans and family members of soldiers. My local vet center here in Swansea, Illinois, they have a meeting of older guys now who are Vietnam era vets who have been coming and meeting there every month since whenever they started the vet center. She told me, I forget, but like that was their way of being able to help them, just facilitating a meeting place where all these guys could come and talk. And they go there and they try to moderate the conversation when they want them there. But other than that, they just let them meet and talk about things. They are so dedicated and so professional. I have nothing but good things to say about them. So another great thing is they don't, if you're still in, is they don't necessarily report to the VA or to the Army or Air Force or whatever you may still be in. So if you wanted, a place with a little bit that practices a little bit of discretion, you can go there and feel safe, and it's not going to get, come back and bite you.
Because I know that's a big reason right there, is that a lot of soldiers, you're told that if you seek mental health training or mental health assistance, then you might get booted out. So that's why a lot of soldiers don't reach out, because they're afraid that if they divulge information that they could have repercussions because of it. But right. Yes, you are so very correct that the Vet Center does not report to the VA. So they are two separate entities, and they don't talk to one another unless you want them to talk to one another.
Right.
Correct. That's correct, because that is a big fear. So for a lot of our viewers, like you said, Casey, just that fear, it's like, oh gosh, if I say something, then it affects me, so I'm gonna keep it in, but ultimately it affects you down the line, either way it goes. So I think the Vet Center is a great resource. And not only now do they provide services for veterans and service members, they've extended it to family members, your dependents as well. So that's another plus. So evolution is great.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Now, I should mention that the VA, I've used the VA for counseling services as well. And I thought they were great too. It was for different stuff way down the road. But I think the VA has come a long way, especially in that area, being able to reach out and help vets with counseling services as well. So not knocking the VA at all, but Vet Center is just such an amazing tool in our toolbox.
And you are so correct in the evolution of mental health resources from from even 2001 or prior to now. It has changed so much, where you have the ability to be able to text and receive counseling that way. You can schedule telehealth videos. Military One Source offers an option to speak on the phone, live chat, or schedule an appointment. The Cohen Veterans Network, I just recently from Dan learned about this organization, and they sound like just an amazing opportunity for not just veterans, but for their family as well. They offer counseling services. They're a not-for-profit organization. And I mean, we really need to be taking into account what it does to your family as well. I mean, we as veterans experience so much and hold so much in, but it does impact our children, and it does impact our spouses.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, oh no, go ahead, Chandra. What?
No, I was just going to ask you, do you feel like, or did you notice any effects from your experience? Did it have any effect on your dependents, your spouse, or your children?
I mean, no, sure. And obviously, I mean, not just that one, right? I don't want to, there are a lot of folks in the military who saw a lot crazier stuff than I did. You know, 9/11 is 9/11 because it's again, it's one of those places that has become American history. But there are so many people with stories like that, you know, that went to Iraq, Afghanistan, these places. And even if you didn't do that, there, you know, people can experience trauma in different ways and different things, and it may not be to that nth degree, but it is no less real to that person. You know, even separating the same guy, I saw these, you know, these I picked up a kid's shoe, you know, in the Pentagon, and we all teared. That affected me in that way at that time. But when I got out, that affected me in a completely different way. You know, here I've been in the military, associated with the military for so long, and it helped define who I was. And I had these group of people that, you know, it was almost like an escape every month to come be around like-minded people and get away. And then all of a sudden, I got medically retired, and I didn't have that anymore. And it was a big jolt. And it was something that I'm sure I carried home, both of those things, you know, and it's, again, the ability and the process to be able to unpack that stuff in a healthy way is really what gets you through it. And I feel for people who think that they have to keep everything inside or do keep everything inside because they should, you know, they shouldn't do that. They should. And thank goodness the Army has gotten better about, you know, telling people that they shouldn't do that.
And I am so glad that you brought up the transitioning out of the military, because that alone it's a very big struggle, and it can be traumatic. You go from having that support system and being told what to do every day, like you have meals, you know, you have a set routine, and then you get out of the military and you have freedom. You don't have your family right there by you like you did when you were in the service. So can you talk a little bit more about your transition out of the military?
I'm sorry, what was that? I missed it.
Oh, can you talk a little bit more about your transition out of the military?
Yeah, so by then I was guard, and we have a very small unit, small MTO. It was like, you know, 15 or 20 people. It was an MPAD, Mobile Public Affairs Detachment. But a very tight-knit unit, very like-minded people, friends. I mean, we, you know, guys that deployed together, spent years together. Yeah, and then just removing yourself from that and seeing them every month. And, you know, a lot of those guys are from upstate. I still talk to them all. I don't see them all the time. But you know, we still have a relationship. It was just the transition and how that, you know, after a few months, granted, not having to plan training for drill and drive up there, that's all great, but just not, you know, not seeing those guys, not having soldiers to take care of, you know, those things that really help define you when you're in, it kind of leaves a hole. And it's nice to be able to work through that with people who are professional and know the stages that you need to go through to get through it.
So did you utilize the services to be able to help you transition out of the military, or was it just kind of, whoa, 1 minute I'm in, 1 minute I'm out, and I have to figure this out on my own?
No, I had been dealing with some other things, and so I used the VA for counseling services. Got counseled by the VA for almost 2 years, and it just happened to be in that time period where I was transitioning out. So I was lucky enough to already be utilizing the service, and obviously talked about it, and it made things better, easier. So yeah.
What
Did
would
you
you
have any?
suggest? Oh, go ahead, Chandra.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask, did you have any other coping mechanisms that help with the transition outside of the resources, such as counseling that the VA and or vet center provided you?
So like what? Like I took meds, or do you mean like anything I did personally
Mhm.
that I mean I like camping and I like video games. I'm a big nerd.
Those are
D&D.
all
Yeah, they're
forms
all
of
kinds of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, those are all forms of coping. Everybody's coping mechanisms look different across the board. I know for instance, I know that the vet center here, they also offer like even swim lessons for people that that might be their coping mechanism. So it looked, like I said, it looks different across the board. So I was trying to see if there was anything else that potentially helped you outside of
No, that's a good point, and that's something that I know is one of the steps. Like, look for the good stuff. You hunt for the good stuff, and yeah, absolutely, all of those things. If you're having a good day, you're not having a bad day, and if you're doing stuff you love, you're not having you're having a good day. So absolutely, that's a great point, Chandria. And yeah, there were all. I'm a big nerd, and I love all types of stuff. So I can always find stuff to keep myself occupied.
awesome.
And that's a great point, is we have the ability to tap into a lot of these local resources that are not nonprofit resources that offer things like that. Like there's Hearts for Healing, which offers art therapy. There's I recently got to speak with Ron Zielinski, and like you talked about hiking and things of that nature. He actually that's part of his nonprofit organization, the Long Walk Home. Bobby Henline is another, he's a comedian who he actually has a nonprofit organization called Forged in Fire, I believe. Don't but there's that they also do things of that nature, like hiking things and whatnot. So there are so many different resources that are outside of the VA that look at the coping mechanisms and can kind of cater to the veteran and what may help service them the best.
Yeah,
So
and
excellent point.
I truly believe it's all about telling their story, and you don't have to have a crazy 9/11 story. I mean, if we all are interested in one another, we have that shared past, and we all know what it's like to don that uniform and shoulder those responsibilities. So Casey, yours was the car accident, and it was crazy and jolting to hear about some of the stuff you went through. Everyone has a story like that, and if you can find people who are willing to listen, it makes it so much easier to feel that burden, to bear that burden.
Right.
So
Yes, you are not alone. If you're watching this and you have a crazy story just like us, you're not alone. And there are an abundance of resources that are out there that are there for you and for free.
And to meet
So
you where you are.
yeah, reach out to us. We are in our communities. We know exactly what's available, and we can try to, just by having a conversation with us, we can find something that may help you more so than something else. Like the VA you may have tried it and it doesn't work, but we may have contacts that say you like art, say you like hiking, say you like to fish. There are so many different outside sources that are here for you.
yeah, guys, and it's important to bring up too is that we, RCTAAs, and we don't always go back and recover this, but we're everywhere. We're I think there are 106 or 108 of us in the 56 states and territories, but we we cover a lot of ground, but we also work within regional teams. So that allows us, if I don't know something, I can ask the 10 other folks who I work with in a team, and we can focus the resources and find the information out that vet needs. All of us here are doing this for the reason that we want to help veterans, that we're all passionate about that. So, reach out. There's somebody near you that can help you, and at least help you find the help that you need.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining in with us for our special edition of TAA Cafe featuring Charles Helmholt. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Much.